We all need to help the family of this murdered veteran. Javon Frazier was a 23-year-old disabled veteran living in Houston. On June the 18th, he was just minding his own business, walking back from the gym at around 11 p.m. Shockingly, a man in a black hoodie began firing gunshots at several men, including Javon. He was rushed to hospital but tragically passed away. Now, this was just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Javon was a churchgoer who really enjoyed working on his fitness and taking care of his health. His family have set up a page to try and raise money to transport his body from Texas to Virginia. A 58-year-old man was also hit by a stray bullet, but he is believed to make a full recovery. At the time of filming this video, police have not arrested a suspect.
I grafted goat and wild boar testicles onto criminal prisoners, believing that men who had committed crimes had lower testosterone levels than other men, and I was never judged for it. My name is Leo Stanley, and it was in 1913 that I was hired as a surgeon with no prior experience. I was convinced that the criminal acts of prisoners were due to diseases, and that's when I decided to try to find a cure. So I quickly thought that any criminal act by a man could be linked to a testosterone problem, and I decided to graft testicles from deceased former prisoners onto sick prisoners. But I quickly ran out of testicles, and that's when I used testicles from goats, wild boars, rams, and deer. My grafts were a resounding success, and I made a name for myself in the surgical world. Despite the horrible experiments I conducted, I was never found guilty, and I retired in 1951 before passing away in 1976 at the age of 90.
There is an update in the shocking unborn baby snatching case. You may remember me covering a case where, shockingly, a pregnant woman was killed. Amber Waterman and her husband were accused of kidnapping Ashley Bush. They allegedly lured her to meet them after creating a fake Facebook profile. The pair were then believed to have killed her. The couple have now been additionally charged in connection with the death of the unborn child. It's believed that the pair attempted to remove the unborn baby from her after she was killed. The baby unfortunately did not survive and was callously dumped in a nearby location. I will link the full story for anyone who hasn't seen it in the caption below. Amber could get life in prison and her husband Jamie faces 15 years.
I was sentenced to 50 years at the age of 16 for something you would never imagine. I am Noah Nay, and apparently I looked like an innocent and normal kid. But this was far from reality. I was trying to join a gang, but they required me to prove to them that I was capable of doing anything. So I did something that changed my life forever. I drove a stolen car to a girl's house and shot her in the neck and shoulder. Trot the window. She ended up surviving, but I had achieved my goal. It was said that if the bullet hit an inch from where it hit, she would have died. Unfortunately, soon after, I was arrested and put in a juvenile detention center, from which, 3 days later, I escaped. But they recaptured me after 4 days and put me back in the center. I was not going to stay there locked up, so I started assaulting the guards at the center. The officers understood that I was not a normal kid, and did not deserve to be treated like one. So they tried me as an adult, and I was sentenced. Do you think my sentence was deserved?
The alleged Delphi killer is believed to have confessed to killing the two girls on a prison phone call. As you may know, 50-year-old Richard Allen stands accused of killing Libby German and Abigail Williams in 2017. During a hike, the young girls documented their day on Snapchat. They then vanished in broad daylight near a bridge and their bodies were found less than a mile away from where they'd last been seen alive. Now, Richard has pleaded not guilty, but new reports are stating that he had a phone conversation from jail on the 3rd of April. This was allegedly a call with his wife, Kathy Allen. He apparently admits several times to killing the two girls before the wife hangs up the phone. At a court hearing, though, Richard's defense attorney states that any potentially incriminating claims made by Richard should be dismissed due to his apparent declining mental state. Richard is currently being held at the Westville Correctional Facility.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know how scary snakes are and how dangerous their venom is. But have you actually wondered what snake venom does to our blood? Well, in the video I'm about to show you, you're about to find out, and it's extremely disturbing. And if you like snakes, I hate to break it to you, but after watching this video, you're gonna have a new fear for them. Because I'll tell you this much, I never want this happening to my blood.
killers admitted on camera, "Welcome to our YouTube channel, day 3 after murdering somebody." Daniel Halseth was a 45-year-old dad who was found stabbed to death. Not only had he suffered over 70 stab wounds, his body was stuffed into a sleeping bag and set on fire. A landlord discovered his body in April 2021 and called police. Investigators then found a disturbing videotape. The video showed 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero and 16-year-old Sierra Halseth joking about the murder they'd just committed. The pair turned out to be the victim's daughter and her boyfriend. They were tracked down when they were caught on CCTV heading in Daniel's car to Salt Lake City. A chainsaw, handsaw and knives were found, along with some disturbing receipts for items such as bleach, gloves and cleaning items. The couple had actually only been together a matter of months, but apparently Sierra's parents were disapproving of them moving to California together. They were both sentenced to life in prison in 2022.
This couple went on a vacation but instead experienced a nightmare. There was a married couple named Mark and Julie. They went on a vacation to an island off the coast of Italy. For the first couple of days, it was nothing but fun, drinking, sitting on the beach, eating. But on their 4th night of the vacation, they went to the beach at night and came across something strange. On the beach were naked people standing around a fire chanting something. Mark and Julie continued to watch as they dragged a young woman tied up on the beach. She was screaming for her life. The naked people then threw the girl into the fire, and her screams echoed off the ocean. After a couple minutes, the naked people dragged the girl's burnt body out of the fire and began eating it. Mark and Julie had enough and went to their room and called for help. When a security guard came, they explained what happened and what they saw. The guard then said, "There's nothing to worry about. We bring them tourists going on vacation to eat, and in return, we workers don't get eaten and get to live here for free." Mark and Julie stood in fear as they saw the naked people running up the beach chanting.
What this man did to his 6-year-old daughter is seriously disturbing. 50-year-old John Edward Kraft from Waynesburg, Pennsylvania, was arrested on the 21st of October 2022. This was after his 6-year-old daughter's siblings told police the horrors that had been going on in their house. They told police that the man had been physically and emotionally abusive to the 6-year-old girl. The little girl's face and body was found to have severe bruising. Police interviewed her and her siblings and found out some seriously disturbing facts. The father would allegedly impose barbaric forms of punishment on the child, including beating and strangling. Another part of his sick punishments involved a hole in the yard that he had dug. He would constantly take the child and bury her alive in the hole in the garden, sometimes overnight. This left the child smelling like sewage, according to police. He's been charged with 3 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of strangulation, unlawful restraint, false imprisonment of a minor, and endangering the welfare of a child. One attorney told the media it was one of the worst cases of child abuse he'd ever seen.
"I tried to poison my husband to get the life insurance back, but unfortunately, he recorded everything." My name is Melody Feliciano, and I was about to separate from my husband, Robbie Johnson. My husband always started his day with a cup of coffee, but one day he noticed a sour taste in the coffee and started to feel ill. At first he thought the machine was dirty, so he cleaned it several times, but the taste persisted. He then thought that maybe the brand he'd bought had changed its formula. But when he made coffee with the same bag at his desk, it tasted normal. Unfortunately, that's when he became suspicious. He checked the water he used at night, and all was well. But the next morning, he discovered that the water contained extreme amounts of chlorine. To dig deeper, he bought cameras and installed them in the kitchen without anyone knowing. That's when my dark secret was revealed. Over the next few days, he continued to gather enough evidence to expose me. He won the case, and now I'm in prison. How many years in prison do you think I deserve? I'm waiting for your response in the comments.
What this father did is like something out of the most disturbing horror film you could imagine. In California in 2011, a family was having a seemingly ordinary Christmas morning. The kids were all unwrapping presents and excited for the festivities. The family had welcomed a newborn baby just 7 weeks before. However, on closer inspection, this was just about the most disturbing Christmas morning anyone could have imagined. The children of William Wallace and Zazel Preston just felt like something was wrong. Their 26-year-old mother was sat on the sofa with sunglasses on. The kids asked their dad what was wrong with their mum, and he replied, "She got drunk and ruined Christmas." In reality, their mum was dead. William had propped her up on the sofa with sunglasses on to hide the fact that he'd actually beaten her to death on Christmas Eve. Zazel had suffered at the hands of her partner for a long time. When William finally decided to ring 911, he tried to pretend like she'd hurt herself. He tried to claim that when he'd propped her up on the sofa, she was still alive. However, police didn't believe him and his story didn't add up. Thankfully, in 2021, he was found guilty. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The 3 children are now looked after by Zazel's mum.
I was found cut in two in Los Angeles over 70 years ago, and the culprit has still not been found. My name is Elizabeth Short, and I am also known by the nickname the Black Dahlia. I was 22 years old and originally from Boston. I had decided to move to Los Angeles in the hopes of becoming an actress, a dream I had since I was a little girl. However, on January 15, 1947, my body was discovered in an empty lot completely drained of blood, meticulously cleaned and severed in two at the waist. My face had been slashed to create a gruesome smile, which further solidified the nickname the media gave me, the Black Dahlia. My murder quickly captured the attention of the media and the public, becoming one of the most highly publicized criminal investigations of the time. Unfortunately, despite significant efforts by the Los Angeles police, no culprit would ever be found. Numerous theories and suspects emerged over the years, but none were confirmed as the perpetrator. Some even began to suggest that I had been killed by the Zodiac Killer. However, my case remains a mystery to this day, and continues to be one of the most enigmatic crimes in the United States.
This is what humans would look like living on different planets. Up first is Mars. The gravity on Mars is lower than on Earth and it's further from the sun. You would be a lot taller with a robust build to compensate for poor gravity, and would have bigger eyes to better perceive the far-off sun. And to protect itself from radiation, your body would have to switch its pigmentation from melanin to keratinoids. So you would probably have an orange-colored skin. Next up is Jupiter. Living on the surface of Jupiter might prove to be challenging since there's no actual surface. The planet is entirely made of gas. So with high pressure, extreme temperatures, and a fluid environment, we will have to draw some inspiration from deep water drillers who deal with the same conditions but on lesser scale. We would be isopods with shells to protect us from Jupiter's radiation, and we would have skin in between our fingers to help us swim. I don't know about you, but I do not want to live on Jupiter. Next up is Saturn, which is also a gaseous planet. It's made of hydrogen and helium with no solid land and powerful winds. And the only way to move within Saturn's thick fog is by flopping around like a jellyfish. You would have an umbrella-shaped belt to propel yourself up, and no skeleton because if you did, it would be crushed by the pressure.
The allegations of Ansel Elgort sexually assaulting a minor are pretty disturbing if they're true. Let's cover them. So if you don't know Ansel, he's an A-list Hollywood actor. He was in a number of movies like the Divergent series, The Fault in Our Stars, and a film that I love, Baby Driver. Now, I remember back when I was in high school, Ansel was a heartthrob and girls really loved him. But that would all change when some disturbing allegations came out in 2020. So on June 19th, 2020, a Twitter user named Gabby came forward with some pretty disturbing allegations about Ansel. Allegedly, according to Gabby, they had connected online, they had met up in person, Ansel had sexually assaulted her, and the entire time he knew that she was a minor, being 17 at the time that they had relations. Now, Gabby wrote a very long and thorough breakdown on exactly what happened. If you want to read it, it's still on Twitter. But it's really disturbing if all of this is true. Ansel was much older than Gabby. Obviously, this whole thing was illegal because she was a minor, and he even wanted to allegedly have relations with her also underage friend. In the wake of all of this, there were other people who came forward and claimed that Ansel had come onto them when they were minors as well. And as proof, the Twitter user named Gabby, who really fired off these first accusations, came forward and posted a screenshot showing Ansel giving her his private Snapchat information. I don't know what to think about all of this. Obviously, Ansel denied that any of this happened in the first place. He posted a pretty thorough response, but yeah, no legal ramifications ever came out of this whole ordeal. But Hollywood really hasn't seen anything from Ansel Elgort since then.
Each of these photos have a backstory that will make you sick to your stomach, part 3. This is a picture of Anna Faber, who was out on a bike ride by herself when she got caught in the rain. She then took this selfie and sent it to her boyfriend only a few minutes before being abducted and murdered. Her body was found 2 weeks later in the woods. Next, in 1997, 14-year-old Michael Carnell started a shooting rampage at the Health High School in Kentucky. Upon arriving, he inserted earbuds and with the pistol from his backpack fired 8 rounds at a prayer group that was sitting outside of the school, killing 3 girls and injuring 5 others. After he finished, Michael placed his pistol on the ground and surrendered to the school principal, Bill Bond. After dropping the gun, Michael said to a surviving member of the prayer group, "Kill me, please. I can't believe I did that." Michael is then diagnosed with schizophrenia and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. In 2022, he was denied parole. Next, on August 30th, 2015, Jolie Callan and her former boyfriend, Lauren Bunner, embarked on a hike within Alabama's Cheetah State Park. Unexpectedly, during the hike, Lauren shot Jolie Callan in the head and then pushed her 40 feet off the cliff. This picture captures the final moments of Jolie, photographed by her boyfriend shortly before the tragic incident.
This doctor in Kansas was recently charged with an incredibly disturbing crime. Meet Brian Albers. Brian is a pediatric neurologist in Kansas City, Missouri. Before his arrest, this is where he worked, at the Overland Park Medical Center. In doing some research for this TikTok, I saw a number of photos of Brian working closely with children. It's pretty disturbing to see him in these circumstances, given what I'm about to tell you. Well, on November 15th, 2023, Brian was charged in federal court on CP or CSAM charges. Allegedly, Brian had been recording children with hidden cameras. The police also discovered text messages that Brian had sent that read, "I'm going to jail. I'm going to lose my license. I do not want to die. I do not want my kids to see me dead." According to the person who actually reported this crime, they were asked by Brian themselves to head to the hospital to retrieve his electronics. Brian then asked the person to destroy these electronics because they contained, quote, "bad stuff." Upon searching these devices, the authorities discovered something disturbing. They discovered over 1,006 explicit videos. Brian had been recording videos of his young patients using hidden cameras from December of 2020 all the way up until October of 2023. And yeah, you heard me say that right. He had over 1,000 videos on his devices. I think that makes these news reports that are still online that feature Brian interacting with children all the more disturbing. So Brian was taken into custody on November 16th, and the FBI is now actively asking people to provide any information they have about him. And I don't think the future looks too bright for Brian.
Friday, authorities in Griffin, Georgia found a 10-year-old child who weighed 36 pounds walking through a neighborhood looking for food. His parents, Tyler and Krista Shinley, were just arrested and had been accused of keeping him confined in his bedroom over the past 3 years and basically starving him to death. This is what we know so far. Neighbors spotted the boy walking down Westminster Circle without shoes, looking incredibly frail, so they took him in and called the police. When authorities arrived, the boy told him that he was hungry and walking to a nearby Kroger to buy food. He told them, quote, "Please don't make me go back home," end quote. The boy was described by police as thin, with discolored skin and visible injuries. He was then taken to a nearby hospital to be treated for severe malnutrition and a low heart rate. Again, he weighed only 36 pounds, which is equivalent to a 4-year-old. After the boy was found, his dad Tyler turned himself into authorities, and his mom Krista was arrested shortly after. During the investigation, it was revealed that they kept their son confined in his cell-like bedroom for extended periods of time and intentionally withheld food from him. Along with that, they also withheld other basic necessities from him, such as light, hot water, toilet paper, human interaction, and a view of the outside world. Court documents showed that the boy also suffered from dental injuries and disfiguration as a result from the abuse. 4 other kids were also found in the home, but according to authorities, there is no indication that they have been physically abused. But they did witness what their parents did to their brother. The Georgia Police Department has confirmed that all of the kids were being homeschooled. The Shinleys were described by neighbors as very private people, and on the outside and on social media, you would have never guessed what was going on behind closed doors. Tyler and Krista are being held in the Spalding County Jail and were just denied bond. They face charges such as false imprisonment, cruelty to children, and attempted murder, as well as many others. The child is reportedly now in stable condition, and the rest of his siblings have been placed in state custody.
After 7 years behind bars, Gypsy Rose Blanchard has been released from prison after a successful parole hearing. Gypsy was just 25 years old when she was sentenced to 10 years behind bars for the 2015 second-degree manslaughter of her mother, Dee Dee. She played a pivotal role in planning and carrying out this murder after suffering years of abuse. You might have seen my previous video detailing Gypsy's story, but have you heard from Gypsy herself? Next month, you can delve into a jaw-dropping new series on crime and investigation, which is set to shock even those already familiar with this case. Whether you agree with Gypsy's early release or not, you have to admit her story is both shocking and heartbreaking. Gypsy was actually a victim of her mother's condition, Munchausen by proxy syndrome. Dee Dee convinced everybody around them that Gypsy was terminally ill. The things that this young girl had to endure are absolutely horrific. She underwent unnecessary surgeries, she was tube fed, forced to use a wheelchair, forced to take medications that she didn't need, and that's just scratching the surface. Gypsy is now 32, and in this 6-part series, we'll see exclusive interviews with Gypsy herself from prison prior to her release. This is exclusive access that's never been seen before. These are Gypsy's own words, and she tells her story in great detail. The prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard will be shown over 3 weeks, with the first 2 episodes airing on January 15th at 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. Crime and Investigation is available on Sky, Virgin Media, or you can stream on Crime and Investigation Play. This is one that is not to be missed. Also, keep your eyes on my page because I will have another video detailing the documentary very soon.
This is by far one of the worst ways somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the video. This is the most disturbing sporting accident I ever came across. On January 19th, 1991, the Lamberthorne race was cancelled due to a horrible skiing accident. Gernot Rangstandler, who was a 20-year-old contestant, was going downhill at full speed when he suddenly lost control as he was approaching the finish line. And he then slammed head-on into safety nets at extremely high speeds. This then trapped one of his skis inside the net, which resulted in his right leg almost being completely torn off. He also fractured his pelvis and was literally ripped in half. The impact caused serious internal injuries, fractures, and nerve damages. He was then transported by a helicopter to a hospital in Switzerland, where he received several blood transfusions, but despite receiving numerous blood transfusions, both during and after the operation, he later passed away from severe pelvic bleeding. The video is extremely graphic, and I'll explain it to you right now. In the video, you see Gernot going down a ski mountain when he suddenly goes airborne. He then collides with the safety net mid-air while going full speed, and his body then starts sliding down the mountain, but at this point you immediately notice something is wrong. As his body is spinning out of control, a trail of blood is following him, staining the entire mountain in the process. And at this point, you see a lot of blood, and you also see Gernot almost ripped in half. His body then stops at the bottom of the hill as a pool of blood forms around him and people come to help. This video is just awful because it's one of those things that you can't imagine ever happening, but it does. How does a safety net rip somebody's body in half? It's just honestly insane, and please don't look up the video because it's extremely disturbing.
This is one of the scariest pictures I've ever seen, and it supposedly shows a demon. This picture behind me was taken at the Haunted Hill House in Mineral Wells, Texas, an infamous haunted house in the state. The Haunted Hill House is a very interesting place with some colorful history. There were a number of people that died there, there were a couple of murders inside of the home, and the place is said to be home to a number of spirits, including the ghost of a little boy who was killed on the upstairs and his mother who was shot to death on the stairs. Her blood is actually supposedly still there on the staircase, you can look at it. But the thing that really gets people's attention in this house is the presence of a demonic being known as Toby. Now, the upstairs of the house pictured here is already creepy enough, but when you find out Toby's story, that's when things take a dark turn. So one of the previous families that lived in the Hill House allegedly practiced a dark magic of sorts, or a hoodoo-voodoo combination. They were doing tons of Ouija boards, they were doing these rituals inside of the home, and at one point they supposedly summoned this demon, which they eventually nicknamed Toby. Now, a few years ago, a group of women were conducting a paranormal investigation inside of the Hill House when they snapped this photo of their friend. You can see their friend pictured right here holding a REM pod, a paranormal investigation device, but in the corner, peeking through the doorway, they captured the face of what they think is a demon. Now, I have to tell you, I think this is one of the freakiest photos I've ever seen. I mean, this thing definitely does not look human at all. And I mean, just look at this thing. You can see its teeth, you can see eyes, its head, you can see these almost claws with fingernails. I mean, it is just a horrific photo that honestly has haunted me. Just recently, I actually spent the night in the Hill House, and the sounds that we recorded in Toby's room were some of the clearest and most frightening that I've ever caught on camera. If you want to watch that full video, just head over to my YouTube channel, The Paranormal Files. It's my newest video, and honestly, we definitely talked to Toby. We heard whistling, we heard growling, screaming, and I can't even explain to you guys how clear these noises were that we were capturing inside of Toby's room. But what do you think? Does this picture actually show a demon? Let me know in the comments section below, and the link to watch that video is in my bio.
This is the Dream World ride incident, one of the worst deaths imaginable, explained. This is a theme park called Dream World, and it opened in December 1981. And in December of 1986, they opened a ride called Thunder River Rapids. The ride simulated what it would feel like to be on a raging river. But in October of 2016, a terrible accident happened on the ride that would close it forever. 6 passengers boarded one of the rafts, and their names were Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorset, Ruzba Orgai, and finally Cindy Lowe. 2 children were also on the raft too. Their names were Kieran Lowe and Ebony Goodchild. Okay, so if you ever got on a ride like this, you know that you go up to a conveyor belt that will lead you to the place where you depart. Now, when you get to the top, water is supposed to be up there to help bring the raft along. But on this day, the water levels were not where they were supposed to be. There were 2 huge water pumps, and one of those water pumps failed. And the water pumps are absolutely essential for this ride to ride safely and properly. But because of the failure of one of the pumps, the water levels rapidly dropped. Now, what happened was one of the rafts got to the area where the water levels were dropped, and then the raft that was holding the 6 passengers who I mentioned earlier, well, this happened. This is a trigger warning, but it's just an animation. So the raft with the 6 passengers on it flipped. And this picture right here is the aftermath, and there's nothing graphic about it, so don't worry. By some miracle, the 2 children were thrown to safety and survived, but sadly, the 4 adults would not be so lucky. What happened was when the boat flipped, it flipped completely over, and 2 of the adults got stuck under the raft and then drowned. Drowning takes a while, and it's said to be one of the worst ways to die. Now, the other 2 adults, well, because the ride operator didn't know what emergency stop button to hit, he just ended up hitting them both. The conveyor belt was still going, and then 2 of the adults then got stuck inside the conveyor belt. And then they were slowly and painfully crushed to death. Thunder River Rapids was then permanently closed after this incident.
This woman sued San Diego County for $4 million after self-enucleating in jail. Self-enucleation is actually the act of removing your own eyeballs. On May 6, 2019, Tanya Suarez was picked up by the police on the street after taking M with her boyfriend. She admitted to being under the influence of drugs and was arrested, but on the way to jail in the back of the police car, she started to hallucinate, and she thought that she was being taken to jail to be tortured. She thought that the only way to prevent this was to remove her eyeballs before anyone else could. While Tanya was being booked into jail, she started to claw at her eyes. Shockingly, she was then pinned down by deputies and had her clothes cut off as well as her acrylic nails. Her nails cracked, leaving jagged edges, and she was then placed into a restraint chair for a medical evaluation. Tanya told the nurse that she suffered from bipolar, took psychiatric medication, and was actually hallucinating and wanted to harm herself. This nurse should have known how to deal with somebody that was intent on harming themselves, and she should have been given one-to-one monitoring until she could be assessed the next day by a medical professional. Instead, Tanya had her handcuffs taken off and she was placed completely naked into a safety cell, which is essentially 4 concrete walls with a hole in the floor for a toilet. Tanya then saw a female deputy at her cell door filming her with a mobile phone, and she started making violent gestures towards her eyes, indicating that she was about to gouge out her own eyeballs. Absolutely nothing was done to intervene or stop Tanya from harming herself, and this deputy actually then watched as Tanya used her cracked nails to gouge out her right eyeball. The deputy then watched for a while before walking away and getting 2 other members of staff. When they got back to the cell, Tanya was covered in blood and both of her eyeballs were on the floor. Tanya was taken to hospital where she spent the next 2 months and was eventually fitted with prosthetic eyes. In March 2020, Tanya successfully sued the county after arguing that they failed to intervene and prevent her from harming herself, and she was awarded $4.35 million.
The death of Robin Williams was absolutely unexpected and shocking, so let's talk about it. Robin Williams was one of the greatest comedic actors of all time. I myself can say that a number of my favorite childhood movies starred Robin. And at the time of his death, Robin Williams was an A-list actor at the top of his game. I mean, everybody knew who he was. But even though he was considered a national treasure, Robin's life wasn't always perfect. In the late 1970s and 80s, Robin Williams battled a number of addictions. And throughout his entire life, he faced a number of mental health problems. Mental health issues that would eventually consume him. These were the last photos ever taken of Robin Williams before his death in August of 2014. In the photos, you can see him in the background hanging out amongst a crowd at some sort of a function. And the photographer at the time had no idea that these were the last pictures that would ever be taken of Robin Williams. On August 11, 2014, Robin Williams was found dead at his home in California. The night before Robin Williams died, he placed a number of wristwatches in a sock and dropped them off to someone. Apparently, he told this person that he wanted them to keep them safe for him. Later that evening at around 7 p.m., he called his wife Susan and stated that he was picking up some magazines for her at a bookstore. Once he returned home, he gave the magazines to his wife Susan, and he seemed okay according to her. He rummaged around the bedroom, took his iPad out, and Susan was actually happy. He then left the bedroom at around 10:30 p.m., and that was the last time she would ever see him alive. Around 12 hours later, Susan believed that Robin was still sleeping and she left the house. At around noon that day, Robin Williams' assistant became nervous because he wasn't responding. His assistant slipped a note under the door for Robin, and then he picked the lock. And when he opened the door, what he saw was extremely disturbing. Robin Williams had hanged himself with a nylon belt from a closet door frame. There were also cuts on his wrists, but it ultimately ended up being the asphyxiation that took Robin's life. Yes, it was eventually revealed that Robin Williams took his own life, and people really couldn't believe it. Robin was an actor known worldwide for his happiness, for his laugh, for his joy that he spread. They had no idea that it was possible that he was struggling so severely inside. It was also eventually revealed that Robin suffered from Parkinson's disease and dementia at the time of his death. And no one knows to this day what really sent Robin over the edge that evening. The one thing that we do know is that the world still misses Robin Williams.
You'll never guess the clever way that this victim of a serial killer helped police catch him. Richard Evanitz's dad was a sadistic and aggressive man. Richard seemed to inherit this behaviour. When he was a child, he was so violent that he even choked his sister to the point where she actually passed out. When Richard moved out, he was arrested for exposing himself to 2 children. Now, he was only given a fine for this, and he would later go on to begin a horrifying crime spree in Virginia. In June 1995, he broke into the home of a 13-year-old girl. He took a gun with him and used the weapon to gain control over her as he SA'd her. A year later, he kidnapped 16-year-old Sophia Silver. She'd been doing her homework in her front garden when he snatched her. Horrifically, shortly after, her body was discovered in a swamp nearby. Another year passed before he would strike again. He abducted 2 sisters, again from their front garden. The girls were 12 and 15, and tragically their bodies were discovered in the South Anna River. Using fibres from the 2 crime scenes, police were able to link the cases together. In 1999, Richard moved back to his hometown, and a few years later he would strike again. This time, however, he set his sights on Cara Robinson. This would be the beginning of the end for Richard. Cara was only 15 years old, and Richard spotted her watering flowers outside her friend's house. He approached her and kidnapped her at gunpoint. He stuffed her into a storage container and drove away. However, Cara was a very clever girl, and she actually memorized the serial number of the box that she was trapped in. Meanwhile, her parents reported her missing, but police dismissed her as just a runaway. Luckily, Cara took matters into her own hands. Cara endured 18 hours of grueling SAs from Richard, but she knew she had to get him on side if she was to survive. She decided to clean for him and chat to him as if he were a friend. She also memorized information from the post that was scattered around his apartment. As she was tidying up, she was making a mental note of everything around her. At bedtime, despite being handcuffed to his bed, she managed to escape and get out of the window while he was still asleep. She spotted a car and ran to it, begging for help. The driver immediately took her to the police station. Thankfully, using all of the information that Kara had discovered, they managed to track Richard down. However, when they got to his house, he'd actually vanished. He fled to a motel in Florida, rang his sister, and confessed to what he'd done. Luckily, she did the right thing and called police. When officers arrived, there was a massive car chase. Richard ended up driving 120 miles an hour the wrong way through incoming traffic. When police cornered Richard, he grabbed a gun and shot himself in the head.
There's been a lot of updates in the case of Savannah Soto, a pregnant teenager who went missing last week in Texas, and the case is now listed as a murder investigation, so let's talk about it. Savannah, who was 18, was 9 months pregnant and a week past her due date when she went missing on December 23rd. She was last seen the day before in Leon Valley, Texas with her boyfriend, 22-year-old Matthew Guerra, but when she failed to show up to the hospital on the 23rd to be induced into labor, her family contacted the Leon Valley Police Department and requested a welfare check. When they arrived to Savannah's apartment, they found no signs of forced entry, but they did find all of her personal belongings, including a lot of items for the baby left behind. Now keep in mind, she was due to give birth any minute, so this didn't really make sense. But LVPD stated that they heard the couple was just out of town, so there really wasn't any cause for concern at first. But come Christmas Day, when it was clear that something was truly wrong, a clear alert was issued and the search for Savannah and Matthew began. During the initial investigation, a neighbor of Savannah's came forward and said that they heard her screaming for help the day she went missing. And they also said that they had previously witnessed Matthew hitting her almost every single day, even mentioning a time that they saw him kick her down a flight of stairs. This does fall in line with the fact that Savannah did take out a restraining order last year against Matthew after an alleged assault. But following the couple's disappearance, Matthew's mom posted this on Facebook, stating her son is not abusive, but believes they were both taken against their will because, quote, he does what he does for money. End quote. His line of work was not elaborated on, but according to this post from Savannah's mom, the family thought that he was up to no good. A big break in this case came yesterday, but it only left more questions than answers. According to Savannah's sister-in-law, someone contacted her on Facebook and told her that they spotted Matthew's gray Kia Optima in the parking lot of an apartment complex in San Antonio. The complex was Colina's at Medical Apartments, and it was reportedly 3 miles away from where Savannah lived and where the two went missing. When the family received that message over Facebook, they notified authorities and then went to the scene themselves to verify, and it was there that they discovered a gruesome scene. The Kia was in fact there, and inside the car were the bodies of Savannah and Matthew. According to the San Antonio police, they were both shot to death, with each having a gunshot wound behind their ear, and it's presumed that they had both been dead for about 3 or 4 days before being found. Savannah was found in the front passenger seat with a car seat carrier on her, while Matthew was found in the back, and there have been a few discrepancies about the scene itself. The police have not really elaborated on the condition of the bodies since this is still an ongoing investigation, but according to Matthew's cousin, who recently went live on TikTok, he was found in the back seat with his pants pulled down with extremely gruesome injuries. Unfortunately, Savannah's unborn baby, who they planned to name Fabian, also died. Authorities have deemed the crime scene as perplexing, and the case is now listed as capital murder. Another twist in this case came from a woman named Annalisa on Instagram who made a post talking about how she and her boyfriend had issues with Savannah and Matthew in the past. She basically admitted to knowing about what happened to Savannah when she was still considered missing, but that she just didn't care. All of her posts have been sent into law enforcement, but it looks like all of her accounts are now taken down. So I'm not sure of the validity of her statements, but I just thought it was worth mentioning as it's kind of blowing up on TikTok right now. This is just a reminder that both families in one day lost 3 people, one of which was a beautiful baby who was just hours away from being born. Savannah was so excited to become a mom and meet her baby. She already had everything that she needed for him and was just waiting for his arrival. And the Soto family has gone through so much outside of this. Just last year, Savannah's younger brother Ethan, who was 15 at the time, was shot and killed during an argument. According to the affidavit for that, it's believed that his killing was an act of revenge for a previous drug robbery. During the trial, the man accused of killing Ethan, whose name is Victor Rivas, made an inappropriate gesture towards the Soto family. And from there, you can see many members of the family launch at Victor attempting to fight him in court. This case is so unbelievably sad, and the person that did this is still out there. So please, if you have any information at all, please contact the San Antonio Police Department.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so the video I'm about to show you shows a woman on a plane completely freaking out over somebody that wasn't human. She got up talking all terrified, saying the person in the back was not human. And based off her reaction, is she lying? Many people believe she actually saw a reptilian shape-shifting. So without further ado, here's the video.
Say whatever you want. I'm telling you, I'm getting the fuck off, and there's a reason why I'm getting the fuck off, and everyone cannot believe it. I don't give two fucks, but I am telling you right now, that motherfucker back there is not real.
So yeah, after watching the video, do you think she's lying? With all the crazy things going on, I wouldn't be surprised if she actually saw a reptilian. But let's say she actually saw something that was not human. Could you imagine the fear this girl was feeling in that moment? Like, just imagine seeing something that you're convinced is not human. I can't imagine that feeling.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
2008, right?
Yeah.
There was a case with a Greyhound bus. Tim McLean was going from Edmonton to Winnipeg. This happened in Canada.
Okay, I was gonna say, what the fuck is that?
All the witnesses say he was in the back of the bus with his hoodie on, headphones on. He wasn't really focusing on anything, wasn't talking to anybody, right? A couple hours later, on a different stop, this guy, Vincent Lee, gets on. At first, he ended up sitting in the front of the bus, away from everybody else, and he ends up going all the way to the back of the bus and sits right next to Tim McLean. He didn't really think too much of it, right? Until, out of nowhere, Vincent pulled out a knife and he just started stabbing his chest and his neck. Fuck. The passengers start freaking out and the bus driver pulls over. They all rush to get off. The bus driver tries to get back on to help Tim. It's already too late. Like, people start calling 911 and stuff. That's when Vincent starts cutting his head off, takes it and start like showing it to everybody.
Like, look what the fuck I did.
And he starts cutting little pieces off. First he eats his heart and then he starts eating the rest of his body as well.
Wait, in front of the cops, or he's been doing that?
He's in front of the cops, bro. He obviously stops and gets arrested. He ends up obviously on trial and shit. March 2009 mark him as mentally insane and they can't put him in jail. The reason why was because he said Tim was a demon and that God had told him to kill him.
That sounds like some schizophrenia.
But then over time he was slowly given more freedom. He was allowed to a different city with supervision.
Bro, don't tell me some shit's gonna happen.
And in 2017 he was set free, and still to this day
He's free?
they gave him the right to legally change his name.
So you're telling me if he had moved to the US,
Somebody could have passed him, bro, and they would have never known.
Imagine.
Okay, so this person killed somebody, and while he was getting interviewed on live TV, he found out they found the body of the person he killed on live TV. And here's the video.
The last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
What kind of person was she? I mean, what did you see?
I mean, she's nice as can be. I mean, very personable, very much a people person.
Do you know any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we just don't know where she is.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. That's how we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
God, you're so beautiful. God, she's so beautiful, man. Am I right or wrong? Look at her. How am I supposed to do this interview? Look at this woman.
Tell me your story.
She's so beautiful. Coño, man. Talk to me, baby. Tell me your story. Tell me yours. Let's get out of here. Let's go. Let's go have lunch. My God, I love her. Look how beautiful she is.
Thank you.
God, wow, man.
So, Tom Hanks?
Wow, man. Yeah, Tom Hanks.
I found out that you are a nerd like me. You love Dungeons and Dragons.
I'm anything like you because I love you.
But
I'm anything like you because I love you. Guys, really? Look how beautiful she is. You guys think it's a joke. How am I supposed to sit over here when I'm looking at such beauty? Come on, guys. She's so beautiful. I'm in love. I'm in love with the interview.
So you play Dungeons and Dragons.
I play Dungeons and Dragons.
So I brought you...
I did say I'm putting it.
Did you? Eu sou o Groot.
It's so good.
Eu sou o Groot.
I love her. Man, she's so fucking sexy. It's not, I can't do this interview. Look at her.
Eu sou o Groot.
Does anyone say this? Guys, what's wrong? Am I the only one that's saying it? Look at her. She's so fucking beautiful. It's like you can't even do an interview with her because you're just like da 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 da. Right or wrong? Oh my God, guys, someone save me. When did this turn into Beautiful World? When did this turn into the most gorgeous girl in Brazil? When did this turn into I love you?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Each of these pictures have a backstory that will make you sick to your stomach. This just looks like a normal family photo of a bunch of siblings, right? That is until you know what the two older brothers on the right did. This is the Beaver family, and the two oldest brothers of the family, named Robert, who was 18, and Michael, who was 16, plotted to kill their entire family for years. The pair was obsessed with serial killers and wanted to gain fame and notoriety by carrying out mass murders. And they then decided to start with their family. On July 22nd, 2015, their 13-year-old sister named Crystal walked by their room, and Robert then grabbed her, covered her mouth, and then cut her throat. She screamed, and other family members came running into the room. Their mother then came running into the room, and the two boys then stabbed her over 40 times. The brothers then stabbed their father over 50 times, and their 12-year-old brother over 9 times. Then they stabbed their 7-year-old brother 6 times, and their 5-year-old sister 18 times. In the end, they killed 5 family members, their parents and 3 siblings, and seriously injuring another. These two psychopaths' goal was to kill as many as 100 people. But they obviously got caught for these horrific murders, and Robert Beaver and Michael Beaver eventually pleaded guilty to all counts and was sentenced to life in prison. Next, on October 6, 2023 in Cambodia, a man named Sam Ang, who you see in this picture right here, beheaded his wife, who was in this picture also, and he also beheaded their 2-year-old daughter. Sam Ang was a drug user, and he had an argument with his wife because of jealousy. Witnesses said that they heard the couple arguing before the incident, and they then heard a bone-chilling scream on the day of the murder. This case is still under investigation, so not much information and articles about it are available online. However, pictures of the crime scene are. The pictures are extremely gruesome, and you see the beheaded bodies of both his wife and his 2-year-old daughter.
Is this the clearest photo of a ghost ever captured? Let's talk about it. This is the image of the ghost boy from the Amityville horror haunting. And at the time that this photo was taken, there was no child inside of this house. If you don't know the story of the Amityville horror, it's one of the most famous haunted house stories in American history. If you don't know why the house is allegedly so haunted, we have to go back in time. On November 13th, 1974, Ron DeFeo entered the family home that he lived in with his parents and his 4 siblings and shot all of them to death. This means that he committed 6 murders in the house in one night. Afterwards, Ron said that he had heard voices that were telling him to kill his family. But the real motive for this crime has never been revealed. Only a year after the murders happened, 1 year, the Lutz family moved in. Apparently the house was being sold for very cheap, and when they were about to buy the house, the realtor told them that 6 people had just been murdered in here last year. And that didn't affect their decision at all, and they moved in. When George and Kathy moved into the house, the typical things that happen in a haunted house started. They were hearing voices, doors were slamming by themselves. Ooze formed on the carpet, smells came and went. George said that he would wake up at 3:15 a.m. every single night, the exact same time that the murders began. And hordes of flies would swarm the house. Only a month after moving into that house, they left. And that's where Ed and Lorraine Warren came in. They were called out to investigate the home, and even though they didn't pick up on anything too crazy, Lorraine did say that she felt like there was an extremely evil presence there, something that may have driven Ron to commit the murders. It was during one of these investigations, though, when the photo of the ghost boy was captured. According to the story of the investigators, a camera had been set up inside of the house to take photos in the middle of the night when no one was inside. And when they went and checked their roll of film after the photos had been taken, they discovered this haunting image. A lot of people who have analyzed this photo say that the ghost boy looks like John DeFeo, one of the family members who was killed by Ron in that massacre. And even though over the years tons of people have taken a look at these photos, no one has ever been able to truly debunk them. Now, if this truly is a ghost photo, I gotta say it is one of the creepiest I've ever seen. I mean, you never see the definition like with this boy and the glowing white eyes. All of it is just so eerie. But let me know your thoughts below. Let me know, do you think that this is a real photo of a ghost? I get it if you're skeptic too. You don't have to say, oh, I don't believe in ghosts. I'm talking about to the believers here. What do you think about this photo? Actor Vin Diesel has been accused of sexual assault in a really disturbing new court filing. Let's take a look at these allegations that are breaking right now. So if you don't know who Vin Diesel is, he's the star of the Fast and Furious movies. He's a pretty famous Hollywood celebrity. Well, allegedly in fall of 2010, during the filming of the movie Fast 5, a former assistant of Vin's is claiming that he assaulted her. So according to the official filing, a woman named Asta was hired by Vin Diesel's company. The company is named One Race, and she was hired allegedly to do a lot of different things around the production. She would do a bunch of different things like helping organize stuff for the production company, and she was also asked to go accompany Vin Diesel to company parties and places in public. So according to Asta, the woman who filed these charges, in September of 2010, she was tasked with waiting for Vin Diesel in his hotel room at the St. Regis. At the time, Vin Diesel was allegedly entertaining some hostesses from a club, and when these women left the hotel room, that's when allegedly Vin Diesel grabbed Asta's wrists and brought her over to his bed. Asta then claims that she escaped his locked wrist. She asked him if she could leave, and he then started to grope her, kiss her body, and just be creepy with his hands. Asta said that she felt like she just couldn't say no to her superior, but when he tried to pull down her undergarments, that's when she allegedly took off screaming down the hallway. According to the filing, keep in mind this is all just alleged right now, Vin Diesel then caught her, he pinned her up against a wall, placed her hand on his private parts, and he proceeded to pleasure himself. And according to this filing, that's when Asta, his assistant, closed her eyes and just let it happen because she was so afraid. So only a couple hours after this whole thing went down, Asta received a call from Vin Diesel's sister. She was the then president of the production company One Race. Her name's Samantha Vincent. And what did Samantha have to say to Asta? Well, she told her that she was fired after being on the job for less than 2 full weeks. So Asta signed an NDA, or non-disclosure agreement, when she accepted the initial position working for the production company, but thanks to an act in California called the Speak Out Act, she is able to come forward with these allegations because this act basically states that you can't have an NDA for something like a sexual assault. So obviously this is very early on in the story, and this is a breaking story, so more details are going to emerge soon, but Vin Diesel has already come out and said he categorically denies all of these allegations, but we'll just see how this thing turns out with time.
These are the worst deaths imaginable, and this is a massive trigger warning because this one is just awful. This was 14-year-old Harley Dilley that lived in Ohio. Harley was last seen alive on December 20th, 2019. At 6:15 that morning, he approached his mother and said he wasn't feeling good and that he couldn't go to school. His mother then obviously said get to school, but Harley was then pronounced missing the following evening. It was normal for him to be gone overnight, but as a 14-year-old, that's kind of odd to me. Harley also had autism and ADHD. When he was reported missing, police searched all of his friends' houses and his ex-girlfriend's house. They obviously searched his home as well, but he was never found. A month went by and Harley was still not found. This was until police got a tip to search a house that was in Harley's neighborhood. The house was under renovation, so they just looked into the windows, and they didn't see anything. The police then entered the home with permission from the owners who were not staying there at the time. And they were then immediately hit with the smell of decomposition. And while searching the second floor, they found Harley's jacket next to the fireplace vent. And since they were so close to the fireplace vent, they looked inside the chimney, where they found the decomposing body of 14-year-old Harley Dilley. So what they think happened was Harley got on the roof somehow by himself. He then went and crawled inside the chimney feet first. Harley was 4'9" and wore clothing from 10 to 12. And the interior of the chimney was 9 inches by 13 inches. And his shoulder width was about 12 inches. And when Harley realized he was stuck, he began to take off his clothes. They believe he then tried wiggling and he got stuck. Like permanently stuck to where he couldn't move at all. This is the chimney he was stuck in, and they say his right hand was stuck behind his back, and his left arm was stuck against his chest in a way of which his forearm was touching his chest. And his head was pointing up. He died from compressed asphyxiation, and it likely took several hours for him to die. It was a slow and painful death, and this all happened because he did not want to go to school that day. I can't imagine the fear and anxiety Harley Dilley was feeling and going through while he was stuck in the chimney. This is honestly such an awful way to die, and may Harley Dilley rest in peace. Okay, so this person killed somebody, and while he was getting interviewed on live TV, he found out they found the body of the person he killed on live TV, and here's the video.
The last time anyone heard from her was an email that she sent out, and no one's heard from her since.
What kind of person was she? I mean, what did you see?
I mean, she's as nice as can be. I mean, very personable, very much a people person.
Do you know any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we just don't know where she is.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you heard anything? Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. That's how we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
Breaking news, a shootout between this guy and the FBI 2 years ago has just led to a massive arrest of over 100 members of a global pedophile network. This is a tragic and sad story, but I'm thankful that these people are being arrested and brought to justice. So this is David Lee Huber. He was born and raised in Louisiana, but he eventually moved to southern Florida where he lived for most of his life. And on February 2nd, 2021, the FBI showed up to his front door because they were serving a warrant for his involvement in a CP case. And apparently the things that this guy was doing involving the CP were graphic and disturbing, so they sent out a huge force to take him in. So when agents first showed up at his door to serve this warrant, he saw them on his Ring doorbell camera, grabbed a rifle, and immediately began firing at them. A lot of the officers returned fire, but unfortunately 2 officers were struck and killed immediately. These were officers Daniel Alfin and Laura Schwarzenberger. Laura was killed instantly, but Daniel was hit and managed to return fire before he was killed. So after an absolutely massive police presence showed up and began returning fire, Daniel Lee Huber then barricaded himself inside of his home, returned fire a few times, but eventually took his own life. This obviously led to a massive response from the authorities, and when they looked into the computers and devices that he had in his possession, they were shocked. So apparently Daniel Lee Huber had been tied into an international pedophile ring. This ring operated on the dark web, they had highly encrypted file sharing devices, and this network spanned the globe. And when they found out that this guy was connected to all these other people, an international investigation was launched. Part of this investigation was focused in Australia, where a bulk of the people committing these crimes were located. I mean, all of this was made public just yesterday, but the Australian suspects that were just arrested are between 32 and 81 years old. They're highly intelligent, as was stated on the release. They know how to manipulate computers and internet networks. And a lot of these members of this ring were producing and sharing their own CSAM or CP, which means that these men were some of the worst of the worst. But this led to an international investigation, like I said, and people were arrested here in America as well, a number of pedophiles that were attached to this network. So I definitely would consider this a win. Obviously, we don't know yet who was connected to this, what's going to come out of this, or exactly what these people were doing, but I think this is a step towards justice. And sadly, these 2 agents who heroically sacrificed their lives trying to protect children ended up saving so many more. But yeah, just here in America, 43 people connected to this investigation have already been arrested for producing CP, possessing CP, all of that. And I'm hoping they will arrest hundreds more.
This is one of the worst Brazil cartel execution videos, and whatever you do, don't go looking for it. Before I begin, I'm just going to say right now, this is probably one of the worst beheading videos that I ever covered. The backstory behind the video is basically non-existent, but people believe it's from Brazil. The video is 2 minutes and 51 seconds long, and it's a very hard watch. As you play the video, you see a man lying on his back on the ground. He's wearing a blue shirt which is unbuttoned, and his hands are tied behind his back. The camera shot is looking over him, giving you a bird's eye view of the victim. The man is on-gagged, but isn't making a sound. He realizes his time is up, but is showing little to no fear and remains calm. After about 4 to 5 seconds, a man with a machete begins repeatedly striking the victim's throat with it. But the killer is very inaccurate, sometimes hitting the victim's throat and other times hitting the victim's chest, leaving deep cuts. Another man can be seen holding the victim's hair to stop him from moving. Blood begins to pour as the victim's chest and neck is continuously being hit by the killer with the machete. After about 10 or so strikes, the victim lets out a couple of grunts but still doesn't scream. After several strikes, the man carrying the machete then places the blade in the wound on the victim's neck and starts to saw away, which cuts through more flesh, which causes a huge flow of blood. At this point, the victim can be heard gurgling on his own blood as he struggles to breathe, as well as hissing sounds, which is coming from the severed windpipe. As he chokes, blood gushes out of the victim's mouth, and it appears the victim is still fully conscious, as his eyes are darting around the room and his mouth opens in pain. As the killer continues to saw away with the machete, the gurgling of the victim stops, though his eyes are still moving. The sawing sound of the machete sounds different after a period of time also. You hear the grinding as the machete blade cuts through the victim's spinal cord. The man who was holding the victim's hair then takes his machete and takes over, once again sawing at the victim's neck, breathing very heavily as he does it. The other man then starts slicing the victim's chest, removing a piece of flesh so that you can see some of the victim's sternum. He then cuts deeper into the chest around the bone, exposing a part of the victim's lung. As this is happening, the other man is still slicing away at the victim's neck. As he cuts through the victim's spinal cord, he lets out a psychotic laugh. And at the 2-minute and 30-second mark of the video, the beheading is complete. The severed head is then held up to the camera as the men hold up gang signs. The head is then placed on the victim's stomach and the video concludes. This video is so brutal, and it's one of the worst beheading videos I've ever seen, and I urge you to never look it up or watch it. As I said, this video has little to no backstory, and it's just mind-blowing that so many people die in such horrible ways without anyone knowing their identity or their backstory. It's genuinely sad. They've been erased from existence in the most lonely and terrifying ways imaginable, and no one will ever know who they were.